and Vugu Nyosi, Black revolutionary now. Today is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Earth Strong Day. So today we honor him and pay respect to him. He was our great ancestor who was in the front line of the civil rights movement. And we're not only going to honor him today, but we're going to speak on him from our perspective, not white people perspective, because I'm sure all you guys know the 1963 I Have a Dream speech on Washington Monument. That's one of the most famous speech because white people and their media have made it one of the most famous speech of Dr. King. Why is that? Because they had a narrative and still have a narrative today to box Dr. King as this is what he stands for. Now, this happened on August 28, 1963, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68. There's a video with Dr. King speaking on reparations and how he's coming to Washington to get his check. And once you see the videos is circling and the white media is trying to honor and pay respect to Dr. King, they will always play that video from 1963. And they will never show you the video where he's talking about reparations, how he's talking about white people say we must lace up our bootstraps. This is a video that contrasts the I Have a Dream speech in 1963, where he's a completely different person speaking. They will never show you that narrative because white people want to box him in 1963. He was never the same person when he was assassinated in 1968. So we have to remember that. We're not going to let white people honor and paint a narrative from their perspective. We have to take control and we have to let them know that you're not going to speak on behalf of Dr. King. We're going to speak on behalf of Dr. King. Because when you look at all these white people back in the days who hated Dr. King and wanted to see him get killed and all the hate speech and all the stuff they used to say to him, this was a man who had a doctorate at 26 years old at Morehouse. You know, he never stabbed nobody, he never killed nobody, he never did anything to anybody, but he was arrested over 250 times because he was standing up for black people. And you are white people who had that narrative, who want to see him and see his family do wrong to him and do wrong to his family. So all these white people today in 2024 keep that same energy because they want to spin the narrative like, oh, I mean, why don't you be just like Dr. King and be nonviolent or whatever? But when he was alive, they wasn't speaking like that. So when I see white people talk about Dr. King today, and try to open up like their nasty mouth and try to talk and try to feel they're going to have a narrative to spin on how we should look at Dr. King, we better put them in check, because you better have that same energy you had when he was alive. So we're not going to let them spin their narrative on how we should look at him. We have to take control of that narrative. We have to honor and control how Dr. King is viewed in our eyes. So while you guys might be watching videos, on I Have a Dream speech, whatever, in 1963, remember he was never the same Dr. King. His ideology and his message, he was more aggressive years after 1963, especially in that video where he said, "We're coming to Washington to get our check." He was never the same person from 1963. But white people want to keep repeating that video for years and for decades, whatever. I mean, I grew up seeing that video. I never think that nothing else existed, because this is how I saw him. So once you start researching, you start digging up stuff here, I realized that, this is not a narrative. So as I close, we pay respect and honor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and check out this video he made just about a few months before he was assassinated. He was never speaking like that video from 1963. So don't let white people fool you and try to box him into that video in 1963. We gonna spin the narrative on how we see Dr. King. Check out the video and please go and do your research on the real Dr. King and how we see him. Peace and Black Power. Black revolutionary now.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check. All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. So just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.